I would like to address a fundamental question that was raised by Raku, but then we have to go into the conduct of war, and then we come to the chain of command issue. Somebody mentioned the last days of Hitler and how the German armies and Navy and the Corps was being commanded by very junior officers. So maybe if you look at the losses suffered by Ukrainian forces, and this is from Colonel, I think, McGregor in the United States, is more than 50%. So, or maybe he says two-thirds. So it is 300,000. So that takes care of definitely that proportion of soldiers, officers, and senior commanders. That's a very natural process. We are not into a very ideal situation for Ukraine. So maybe it's the fag end of the war. And this is very natural process that when the senior commanders are taken out, it doesn't matter, Zelensky or whosoever, because in war there will be casualties of senior commanders, and the Russians have been targeting the headquarters. So one, it's a natural process. Two, fundamentally wrong thing was the direction of war right from the outset. As I mentioned that Ukrainian command of the forces was outsourced to NATO, who may not be really looking at how the Ukrainian commanders look at. So any advice which was given by Zelensky of, let's say, conserving or staying back and not shoving into meat grinder may not have been taken positively by the political. So there are a lot of politics. Third is as I always say, Ukraine has been turned into an info ops theater, and it's basically now meant for point scoring of the weapons equipment coming from NATO and Leopard 2s. And even if LinkedIn is mentioning in China that Ukraine will win, so it's very, very absurd that here we have lost more than half of the army and the forces, and they are still talking of victory. So this is, I think, the fundamental problem is the direction of war and the outsourcing of military command. It never happens in a conventional war. Ultimately, it should be with the Ukrainians. That has not happened. Now we come to where we are. I think of this counteroffensive we have already discussed that it was. I don't think it was. It was more of probing attacks, just for the information operations. So because they have not breached the Russian defense line, they are just in the security zone, and they are being taken out by the Russian defenses. I think that was done as pointed out, and one will bear with me that this is how it is happening. So there are a lot of losses. So this is very natural. Normally in military, if the colonel is gone, then the major takes over. So this is something similar to the German army's last days, the last year, when the Russians were pushing them, that there were a lot of loss of senior leadership, and then there is bewilderment. And the amount of surrender that is taking place in the security zone it confirms that the soldiers and young officers have lost morale. They feel they have been shoved into meat grinder, into an unending battle where there is no chance of success. So I think logical way is to surrender instead of just getting lost. So these are, I think, some of
Um,
the things. So Russians have an edge here, and I don't think so. There is much reserve left by with the Ukrainian forces to change the let's say tone and tenure of the battle. They are in the lose.
Wakar.
So whenever there is a losing, the loss at the end, there'll be confusion, there'll be disruption of chain of command, and unfortunately, that has been right from the word go. From the day one, Ukraine side was misdirected.
Yeah, I think one of the consistent mistakes I've been seeing the Ukrainians making since Russia withdrew from Kherson and Kharkiv area is that they assumed Russian mistakes were their genius. Most of those things happened just because Russia had overextended itself. It had like 120,000 active troops on the front line, and those were Russian mistakes. They had a lot to learn about logistics and many other things. So literally, the plan they had as to how this fight is fought, this is the time they actually implemented it. At first, there was a whole lot of confusion, and with what Putin was talking about, showing that document, saying that there was already a peace deal in plan or whatever, that means the Russians were going in for political reasons at first, and then and then now they had to go in militarily, and when they decided to withdraw, I think Ukrainians assumed they really learned the wrong lessons about the conflict. And then the other thing that I think was mentioned was oh yeah, the soldiers that are defecting right now. I think also we want to give credit to Russian. I don't know what they call them in the battlefield, but most information warfare, right? I was reading somewhere that they are reaching out to the Ukrainian fighters through radios, through all forms of communication, and convincing them that this is not worth it. And obviously, them seeing their comrades lying on the ground, scattered dead, doesn't help either.
Yeah, I even heard they were using drones with speakers on them, flying over and giving them instructions how to surrender. That was earlier than, but I'm sure they're still doing it now because anything they can get over there. I mean, I've seen there was even videos of them loading artillery shells with leaflets to fire at the Ukrainian positions with instructions on how to surrender and all that. So they've been very generous on numerous occasions. But then again, you got to figure a lot of those guys probably get shot in the back if they try. I mean, I'd be curious to see the story about this platoon and the 20 guys or so, the two guys, not before the today. I'd be curious to see how they were able to break away from their lines and surrender, especially the guys with the 2 BMPs. Because I could see you dropping your gear and sneaking away through the woods. But they actually took 2 vehicles, I guess, to haul their wounded. And then the other guys were carrying the guy with the stretcher. And there was about, 15 of them, plus the 6 guys on the, with the stretcher. I mean, I'm just curious how they're getting away because, I wonder if they are actually just getting dumped off, and since no one's around, they're like, screw it, I'm out of here.
There've been quite a lot of this how do you call it, when they have the control forces that shoot the guys that run.
Yeah, you should see how.
I think Russia is playing mind games with Ukrainian soldiers. Some of these prisoners, I think they were caught over than a week ago. They just showing them now, like they're surrendering, like hours ago or something like that.
Yeah, make it look like there's a big wave of surrenders, even though it's a week old. Because they probably think everybody died in the first 2 waves. Now the 3rd wave, everybody surrendered. That makes sense. I mean, that's a good play too. And they always make sure they show videos of them not being mistreated. They're carrying the guy on a stretcher. The only thing maybe, they got to walk with their hands on their head and hunched over, but
normally Wagner is the one who make video, but now Russia army is showing lots of videos.
And that might work too if they see a lot of guys surrender and they can get that out there. Maybe guys will be like, "Hey, they surrendered. Why don't we?"
Yep.
Haven't been sort of a theme now during the winter that the Russian army can't do anything. They're just sitting in the hole, and it's only Wagner that's capable of something. But if you look at the first weeks of the offensive or the intervention, they were moving like, I don't know, 50, 100 kilometers per day. It's really.
They've also held the line, Peter, so that's very important too.
No. But I mean, they sort of have this narrative during the winter now that it's only Wagner that can do offensive action, and now sort of
and they're doing it with a lot fewer losses too.
Vaughn, you're muted.
Yeah, I just feel sorry for the Ukrainian soldiers because, I mean, think about it. I tried to visualize this in my mind because I never went to the military. I just did paramilitary, which was like one of those things where you have to.
Shame on Kenya.
Once you finish high school, you have to go through this training or whatever. But I imagine like a plane, like a flat Ukrainian terrain, and then there's a tree line, and you're being told that's where the enemy is at, and you're being told, okay, now go assault that area. Imagine you can't even see this person. You can't even see them, and you're supposed to go across this plain and assault people you have never seen. God, it has to be so difficult.
The thing is, they're getting the backup from the Western media. I think yesterday, I saw on BBC the way they were saying what Ukraine is getting from Russia. You know,